Hello and welcome to the League of Ireland preview show on independent.ie. I'm Aidan O'Hara. I'm joined by soccer correspondent Daniel McDonnell. And Dan, normally we'd start these shows looking ahead to tonight's games, but given to the end of a European week, we might have a quick look back at how the Irish sides fared. And two defeats and two draws, not quite matching the optimism which seemed to be there when the draws were made.
No, it's a weird time of year, all right. Like, Friday is generally League of Ireland Day, but in these sort of July weeks anyway, and hopefully into August, there's obviously the main focus is almost midweek in a way. And yeah, I think when I watched all the games this week, I think you'd have to be disappointed, but also very conscious of the sort of the picture of European football in these rounds and how it really is 180-minute ties and it can be tight. And while I'd still be confident enough, it'll be positive enough outcome for the Irish clubs. It's more maybe certain aspects of performance levels rather than the actual results. I would say that the three teams in the Conference League probably have results that set them up to potentially go through. But obviously probably the real concerning one, Shamrock Rovers at home in Tala, the champions, the best team in the country. They were very poor.
Mm-hmm. How do you what way do you stand in terms of the element of them not being tested, if you like, at home? That this is a thing that was sort of put around. It's been a thing that Celtic and Rangers had for a long time when they struggled. Rovers have fairly much dominated the last few years. Where do you stand on that in terms of them not being tested at home impacting on their European form, or should they just be better anyway?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a ridiculous point. I think maybe, I know it was Stewie Byrne who said it initially, and I think it probably I mean, the way the elements of how it was delivered sort of maybe might have frustrated people. It's not a straightforward thing. And it's a weird one because we've probably spoken about the league a lot this year. I think probably the in terms of the levels, like I think the teams probably lower down in eighth and ninth, and the likes of Drogheda and that are doing very well and they've improved. But there's certainly a concern maybe about the inconsistency of the teams at the top end and how that extends to their standards. And it's true, like, I mean, Shamrock Rovers in reality should be, with their results this year, they should arguably be 6-7 points off the pace, just based on what it's taken to win a league in recent years. But yet they're in this sort of position where they're still 4 points clear or 3 points clear, whatever the margin is at the top of the table, without having to play well. And I think, there's a lot of experienced players there. They've been around the league in most cases for a while. They're not necessarily at the point in their life where they're sort of looking to do things to get moves to the UK. In a lot of cases, they're at a slightly more comfortable place. And maybe they've just set into a degree of a comfort zone that maybe comes from getting away with stuff domestically. So I think to say that, that they haven't been tested enough, I know like people say, well, that's ridiculous because they've dropped loads of points, so they have been tested. But I don't think they've been pushed to their limits because they're able to get away with mistakes. And I think that there's no doubt that then you go to Europe and you play sides who just seem that little bit sharper.
Yeah, I think like the Shamrock Rovers team of this year would certainly be chasing the Shamrock Rovers team of last year or the year before based on points dropped. We might just move towards the home front. I mean, I think with the European games, it tend to take a bit of the sting sometimes out of the League of Ireland. But I mean, it's a very good sign to Talca Park sold out, albeit with the weather not exactly set fair for the day. But it seems that they're hopeful to get the game on anyway.
Yeah, that seems to be the vibe. Speaking now, we're sort of getting close to midday, so they're hopeful enough. I mean, it is a strange time because I suppose Shells and Bows are teams in fifth and sixth. They have games in hand because of the games that were arranged in Europe for games that were arranged for the European sides. So there's a weird one for Shells and Bows that they're playing each other in the cup next week as well. So it's possible that if one team was to lose both of these games, their season could be looking pretty bleak. And then there's a degree of pressure to get points on the board because Europe is where you want to be. So it is an odd time for those clubs. There's no question about that. But I mean, it is still like a proper big game this evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's as well. It's not exactly been the way it's been too unfair. It probably hasn't been sold on the entertainment factor, given that the two games between the two teams so far, I think they've produced one goal between the two teams. But like, it's going to be tight. You would expect again.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's true. I mean, Shells, they did sort of open up and beat UCD. Bows were involved in a thrilling game against Dundalk last week. But it's true that the meetings between the sides, if you don't count the Leinster Senior Cup, have been pretty low quality in terms of attack and play. Let's be honest. We'll see. I mean, these conditions are definitely going to be a factor in some shape or form. I mean, certainly it could add a sort of variable to it. But I don't know. You would hope that. I mean, some of those games previously are probably an early stage season battle. I know you were at the first one, but we're at the point now where you're sort of into the final sort of third of the season. A draw probably isn't a terrific result for either side, so you would sort of hope that if it's in the second half, and if we do have a cagey 0-0 after 60 minutes, which wouldn't be surprised if you ended up in that situation, that there would be a real incentive for both sides to really go for it, and we might actually get a slightly better game. Certainly the cup tie is going to, you would think, will have an element to that too. But I suppose the flip side, if a team gets ahead early, could it get ugly? It's very possible.
Yeah. And the other game, the UCD Drogheda, I mean, everyone's targeting beating UCD, but like points on the board are so important that, especially down at that part of the table, where Drogheda to get a win, they could sort of relatively relax and watch Sligo against Cork on Saturday night.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, I suppose like it's the nature of it. Like all these relegation teams have games to play too because they're not in Europe. So, they are significant games. I mean, Drogheda, they probably just have to look at this game as a must-win. And I've mentioned it before. They've not always found it easy against UCD, and I wouldn't be surprised if UCD made it tricky for them. But it probably is a chance for them to build some ground because Sligo and Cork, Sligo Rovers and Cork. Clearly, like you would imagine it's going to be tricky for Cork to go and win there, although they've come close to doing it earlier in the year. But I think for Drogheda, they've got some business done on contracts this week with some of the younger players. There's obviously investment stuff that's about to happen, which might give them a little bit more security. But they got to stay up, and it's a game that they just have to go and win in simple terms.
Yeah, a couple of interesting games, even though there are only two of them tonight. Dan, thanks so much for your time, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.